All right, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, I want to hear from Bob Price on the
I know,
issue
and
of.
Bob and I
Have
agree,
you been
Greg.
following? Have you been
Yeah,
following the
Greg.
winter
Yeah,
storm
Greg.
fallout?
Greg, we can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
You faded
Oh, now
out.
you can hear me. Hey,
Hey,
Bob,
Bob.
have you been following the winter storm fallout? I'd like to get your take on it while I run to my desk.
Well, actually, I haven't been following it real closely lately, so I'm not sure what the current state of legislation and stuff is. But I'm going to agree with Sue about the water issue. That was much more widespread than the electricity issue was. 14 million people lost water, and a week after the storm had ended, there were still like 6 or 7 million people that didn't have dependable, drinkable water. That's just.
We didn't even have any rolling where you got some water for a little while. At least it went away.
I don't know how you would
We
do
got
that,
nothing. But we got no explanation. Nothing.
Yeah, it was really bad.
I applaud
Man, it's not about you have water to drink. It's about you can't flush your toilets.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just unbelievable.
But the thing that made me alarmed in all of this was when they got on TV and said, do not drip your water. I'm from Gary, Indiana. When we had freezes like this, of this nature, you always left. My mother, my dad would always tell us, make sure you leave that water dripping in the bathroom. Make sure you leave the water dripping in the kitchen. You did that so your pipes would not freeze.
Right.
When they got on there and
you hope
said,
your neighbor's house
don't
doesn't
drip-
catch on
don't-
fire because there's no
don't
water
drip
pressure.
the water because they
in the
want to
system.
protect the water
Right.
pressure
I
and protect the
suppose-
system. And that's why the people's pipes all burst. They showed in Third Ward, they still have people who do not have water because the pipes burst and the pipes have not been able to get fixed. They have
Right.
apartment complexes that still don't have water because they can't get the parts and they can't fix them. I mean, that was I knew then something had to be wrong on the city's level. And the reason they were saying that, because their generators were not working, but they weren't going to tell us that. That's why they were saying that.
Well, did they even send anybody out to look at them and do a pre-maintenance when we knew this was coming in? And we got Harvey money to buy brand new backup generators because our others had failed so badly during Harvey. Did we spend the money on that?
I mean,
And
these
you're
are
right,
just
Bob.
Mr. Turner will
Ask
be
the
very
fire
transparent.
department what it's like to get out to a fire when people's homes are burning and you have no water to fight that fire.
Now, these are people that park cars in the basement during a hurricane.
Yeah.
So what do you expect?
Hey, I wanted to give Tamara Bell a big shout out for her the job fair she was involved in. I think she is in conjunction with Commissioner Ramsey. Tell us what happened tomorrow, or did you take off?
Commissioner Tom Ramsey had come to me on December the 17th, and he had told me that while he was campaigning, he met a company in Harris County that had 1,000 job openings, and I told him that I just really didn't believe. And remember, y'all, this December 2020, that there could be a company that had 1,000 jobs and couldn't get people to come to work for them. And he was like, tomorrow they cannot, and the jobs are real. And I was like, well, tell you what, if they got the job, I can get them filled. Next thing you know, within a few weeks, we have a Zoom call after he's sworn in, and the company's like, yes, we need 1,000 at a minimum, and we need them to start April 1st. Now, this is January that we're meeting. And I was like, okay, well, we can get this done. So we're having our meeting, and then a freeze happened. They had the same problems everybody else had. So they were not like, well, we can't do a Zoom call. We can't do a Zoom call. So we get back with them on February 26th. We're like, well, we know we're planning on this March 27th, but we know that you all want to change it. They were like, we ain't changing nothing. We need the people. Let's do it. So I reached out to Prieta Stallworth, who's the trustee at HCC, and we picked the South Gessner site. And then I told the man, okay, you're in Waller. I know people who live in Montrose, 3rd Ward, Hillcroft, Acres Home, 5th Ward. They love to have these jobs, all over the city, but they can't get there without transportation. So we had to get Metro to come on and buy in on a public-private partnership. They weren't moving. So we had to call Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and she was like, oh, you going to give people jobs in Houston? Fine. She called Metro. All of a sudden, we get it going. So the change maker in this is that Daikin then turns around. It's a private transportation company that is supposed to pick the people up from the Hillcroft park and ride and the 290 park and ride and take them to work and bring them home. They're getting that worked out. So these people will have transportation once they get to those sites. They're going to have transportation, and that's a game changer because the night shift starts at $14.50 an hour. Benefits start the first day. But what blew me away I'm telling you the age of the people that came. First off, the people were there at 7:30. We didn't start at 10. There were people who were long post what we consider retirement age, who had lost their jobs during COVID, who came out. There were multiple engineering jobs. I don't know how many they had, but over 200 engineers in suit, dressed, resumes showed up. They had to tell them, let us just take your resume, because it was a 3-hour wait for the interviews, because they were interviewing. They had drug testing, they had background, all on site. Over 300 people walked away with jobs. I mean, they were crying. They were crying. There were people talking about how they knew they were about to be evicted. You know, the moratorium ain't gonna last, and they got the jobs. I mean, of all the things that I do, and I do a lot. I'm not even gonna go down there. This was so rewarding because this is immediate impact on households that changed. If you ever been somebody who did an interview and got a job and was excited, then you know how these people felt.
Hey, congratulations to you. I want to go to Bill King real quick. Bill, you keep a close eye on the pandemic numbers. Where are we right now? Give us a sense of things.
Well, we've been through about 7 or 8 weeks of just this unbelievably dramatic decline. That began to flatten out last week a little bit. There was a distinct sort of plateauing. There are a few places in the country that there's some indications it's actually getting worse. Nobody really knows exactly what's causing that. The sort of the traditional explanation about the opening up, and that doesn't hold because it's some of the states are the most locked down that the cases are going up. Texas, they still are going down quite a bit. I tell you one thing that Marcus and Tamara need to really pay attention to is some of the outbreaks are in cities that have big African American populations where the vaccination rates are significantly lower. I mean, and all the polling shows there's significant vaccine hesitancy in the African American community, and that really needs to get fixed.
I'm glad you brought that up back, Bill. For everybody, I've been vaccinated. I got my vaccine. I got a one and done. I got a Johnson & Johnson. I was fortunate enough to get on the wait list. I got on the wait list. They called me within 48 hours and I got my shot. Let me tell you all, listen, I don't know. I had to be like Chris Rock. Hell, I don't know what's in Tylenol. I don't know what's in Advil. I don't know what's in ibuprofen. I don't know what's in Bayer. I have no idea, but I know, damn, I got a headache. I take it, my headache gone. I'm happy. I mean, I go out to restaurants, I eat. I swear they say they clean. I pray they clean. I eat my food, I go home. I'm telling you, but what I have seen personally of the impact of some people who have gotten COVID who are no longer here, I'm telling you, for me and my family, we were like, we're going to do it. So I'm telling you all, it is something personal that you do, but I'm telling you, as a kid, I don't know what the hell they shot. That didn't tell me was my polio shot, but I still got the mark. And I'm doing great. I'm telling you, take it upon yourself, do your research, but you all need to definitely consider what you're losing but not doing.
Hey, as we continue in extended time, I wanted to go to Bob Price, who I think has some additional intel on the border.
Well, we didn't talk about numbers on the border. We hit a 15-year high in February. And keep in mind, during February, we had that whole winter freeze thing going on that literally shut things down for almost a week down in the border region, where they actually had freezing conditions down there as well. So by March the 20th of this month, in the Rio Grande Valley sector, they had already exceeded the numbers for the entire month of February by about 25%, with still 11 days to go in the month. And you're seeing thousands. Border Patrol officials, I spoke with the deputy chief of the Border Patrol this week. They are apprehending 6,000 per day, 6,000 people per day. That's just unprecedented in recent times. So we've definitely got a crisis down there. The danger to these children throughout this process, where's CPS involved in all of this? Why are we allowing the abuses of these children and then just finish the human smuggler's job by transporting these kids to the very people that put them in the dangerous positions they were in to start with? It's untenable. The situation that Joe Biden inherited was a system that had stopped 90% of the family unit crossings and the unaccompanied minor crossings. And they totally destroyed that process and have this in what they really thought was when they came out at the end of January and said, don't come now, wait 100 days, give us the opportunity to do some things. They thought that was going to stop people, but the cartels are down there actively recruiting people, literally advertising for people to bring them up here and bring them across the border. They're getting $6,000 a head. You multiply that times 100,000 people that crossed in February, that's a lot of money that's going into the hands of these drug cartels. And we are complicit in that.
Hey, I want to switch gears real quick and talk to Marcus Davis, who has a very unique capacity because, you know, as thousands of people walk through his restaurant and enjoy his food, he gets to listen to their conversations, engage in some of them. What are you hearing about this Chauvin trial coming up this week, Marcus?
Yeah, the Chauvin trial is what it is. You know, the sentiment is quite simply, we know what he did, and we know what the expectation is. So as a result, I don't know if there's been an overwhelming amount of talk about it. I do know one thing I wanted to mention was this Georgia law that took place, and the hype behind it, and how it is so unfortunate. I think Bill mentioned this earlier, and tomorrow as well. But it's so unfortunate that we absolutely refuse to sit down and look and say, let me find out what's in this legislation, and let me understand whether or not this is good or bad. Let me understand whether or not this actually makes sense. I, for one, don't understand why there's a problem with requiring an ID for a mail-in ballot when you require an ID for in-person ballot. I don't understand. I personally don't understand why that's an issue. I don't understand why handing out water is the issue, right? This is just two sides with the heels dug in. And as a result, the rhetoric got louder than the bill itself. But here's the bigger thing for me. The state representative in Georgia that was arrested and charged for knocking on the governor's door in protest received a charge that could get her up to 8 years in jail.
Damn.
I want the same energy for every single person that walked into that Capitol on January the 6th. And we're not.
I think you're seeing that, Marcus. There have been 300 people arrested and being prosecuted.
I didn't say 300 people. I said every single person, every single one of them. If she gets 8 years, or she goes on trial for 8 years for knocking on the governor's door in a building she works in, then every single person that went onto the property of the Capitol should get the exact same charge.
What did they charge her with?
8 years.
No, what did they charge her with? What's the crime?
I'll send it to you, Bill. I'll send you the crime.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I wanted to ask Sue Lovell a question. Sue, are you still with us?
Yes. I am.
Hey, you know, Paul Bettencourt has, among his slate of bills, is one that would, I think, essentially remove the capacity to use a P.O. box as a residence in the voter registration process. Is that an unreasonable request? You know, or should people be allowed to use P.O. boxes as their address of record and not have a physical address?
You know, I haven't really thought about this. My initial reaction is to say, no. I mean, if you're here and you're living here, you have a physical address where you live, and it can be proven that you live. I hadn't really thought about that at all. I thought you were going to ask me about Bettencourt's bill that stops the PFCs, the building of housing, that takes it off the tax rolls and gives the developers a real edge on that. But I would like to ask Marcus, the people coming through, what is the conversation around vaccines? That you're hearing? Because I find that I understand the reluctance, but how do we how do we encourage that? What do you hear?
I'm seeing quite a few people with the vaccine. I'm seeing
Okay,
quite a
that's
few
good.
folks that are saying they either got it or they're going to get it. I know personally my people that work on my team, they went out to get it. There was no reluctancy, there was no hesitancy. I'm not saying it doesn't exist somewhere out there. I don't know if those numbers that Bill mentioned have more to do with apprehension than they do to access, and that's
Exactly.
both access to the vaccine and access to the right information, right?
Right.
Yes, there's this stigma that's attached. There's a historical precedent that people can refer to, but I don't know that, and even me, a sensible person, I had to do my, I think things through. I'm quite analytical and quite, I try and make logic out of everything I had to think about, and not dealing with the old argument of do I trust the. I just had to ask myself the right questions and get the right answers before deciding to get the vaccination.
That's
So
interesting.
I think it's the apprehension is one, but it is also the access and the information.
Exactly.
I think it's
Well, example, Sue, is that TSU, it got out. I live in Third Ward, and somehow it got out that they were giving vaccines at TSU, but nobody had read the fine print. The line blocked, it stopped traffic. The people had showed up. They didn't know you had to have an appointment. So they were like, okay, they had to come out there. They had to bring the HPD, they had to bring TSU police to get the people to leave. So people have called me. They like tomorrow. I've gotten people on the list at the city. I've gotten people there. So I can't say that is what is occurring. People may not understand. And one of the things I explained to the mayor, I sent him a long text. When the city calls you, after you have tried to get on the list, they send a no ID, no call ID number, or it says a spam risk. Seniors are not going to pick up those calls because they've been told, hey, that's a scam. They're going to try to take your money. So I told them, why can't they just say City of Houston so that people will know who's calling? Then I told them on that card that they give them, on the back of it, it has a date. Well, seniors go to doctors. They think that means appointment. That doesn't mean that. That means you got to have the second shot by that time. So they show up, and then it's like, well, you're not here to get a shot. It's going to take fast. So they need to work that out, because I'm telling you, it is not the way that they're saying that Black people don't want shots.
I think Bill had something to say.
Well, I think it's a combination of access and hesitancy. I mean, it's the polling is clear. Ironically, the two groups that don't want to take the vaccine are Trump supporters and African Americans. Those are the two groups, of all the two groups that don't. Those are the ones that have the most hesitancy about it. But I got to tell you what, the vaccine rollout is nothing short of miraculous. There's never been anything that's happened in the world like this before. We now have 50% of everyone over 65 in the United States fully vaccinated. And we just discovered the genome 15 months ago. Nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the world. And it's largely due to the fact of this mRNA technology and the fact that they can design within about 30 or 60 days of them decoding the genome. The scientists knew that these vaccines were going to work. Now, they had to go through all the process to prove it, but they knew chemically, by microbiology, they knew these things were going to work. We've never had a vaccine approved in less than 4 years before. This was truly miraculous.
Hey, Bob
That's
Price.
what I'm saying,
okay, go ahead,
on
Sue.
these other big issues that we have. Agreed, border is huge. But if you left the politicians to just figure out how you have a vaccination, we wouldn't have one. You take people that are experts in a field and you put them to work to solve the problem. And we have some other issues that are just as big. And so why not take people that are experts in those fields and turn them loose and have them figure out how we manage and solve some of these problems? It's just not going to be done in the political arena.
By the way, I want to recommend this book, The Two-Party Doom Loop, Breaking the Two-Party Doom Loop by Lee Drutman. I'd really recommend you guys read it. It's a fascinating book, and it talks about how how the political institutions in this country have evolved to create the situation where you basically got two parties that only represent about 20% of the public each, that, we have to pick between the two of them. And it's unlike any democracy in the world. Really an interesting book.
Hey, I want to get Bob Price back in. He had some comments on Betancourt's bill, which would ban the PO boxes.
I sent you the charges that it was felony disruption of a general.
Yeah, I read it. So back to Betancourt's bill. We need to be careful on that. There are legitimate reasons why people have a postal mailbox address, whether it be U.S. mailbox or a UPS store or any other private mailbox. One of those is you have a large retirement community that doesn't have a physical address. They live in RVs and motorhomes and trailers, and they travel around the state, travel around the country, and it's thousands and thousands of people that will be disenfranchised if you tell them that they can't use a postal mailbox as their residential address. So we got to be careful with that and not be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The more important thing is that a person doesn't vote or register to vote in two locations. You'll see a lot of times, like Winter Texans, that'll be registered to vote in Minnesota and in Texas. That's not right. So you pick your place, one or the other, and stick with it. But I don't think doing away with the mailbox thing is a good idea.
Okay, Marcus, what issue did we miss this week?
It's not anything I had really, thought about. You make a good point. And, a lot of people are in RVs traveling around, and this is as long. But then how do you really prove, just because you have a PO box there, how do you really prove that really is where you reside? Because you're moving all around.
Because it's where you claim your residence. And as long as you're not claiming it in multiple places, what difference does it make? One person, one vote right here.
Marcus.
So where you receive your mail is how you would claim your place of residence. Okay.
Right.
Well, in those terms, that makes sense.
And for security purposes too, some people don't, your voter registration address is a public document. Anybody can grab that information. And some people don't want, from security standpoint, people knowing where their house is, whether they're law enforcement officers or, a variety of other people, somebody that's got a disgruntled spouse looking for them. It's ridiculous that's a public record that anybody can access. So there are very legitimate reasons for using other registration.
Well, the reason this stuck in my mind is I forget what election it was, but one recently you had, I believe it was Jarrett Woodfill and Hotze and them coming over to the UPS store right over here on Wall where I live, and they were showing that people were voting, but the address was where these PO boxes were, and they were saying that was voter fraud. So that's sort of what made, I thought, well, that was one instance you could say maybe, but I think if it's just really clear about what it means that you have a PO box and where you're claiming it, that would then stop people from going and saying it's voter fraud because you have a PO box.
This whole issue is once again a reflection of the problem of the primaries. I mean, I know Paul Betancourt very well. I've seen him go do voter registrations all over, Harris County when he was the tax assessor collector. I know Paul doesn't believe that voter fraud has affected the outcome of any elections, but 80% of the people that vote in the Republican primary do. So he's got to go pander to that, even though he doesn't believe that. And that's the problem we've got. These two little minorities out there on the fringe that represent about 20% of the American people are driving the entire agenda that we're talking about.
Marcus, what did we miss this week in terms of issues? I wanted to give you that shot.
Well, that was the one that I wanted to bring up. The idea, the charges of the state rep compared to the charges of the people that invaded the Capitol.
Well, that's basically what they're charging the people at the Capitol with. But I think sounds to me, I don't know any of the facts of that case in Georgia, but it sounds to me like that's a little bit of prosecutorial overreach.
Oh, without a doubt. All I'm saying is keep that same energy for people who actually did break into the Capitol. And yes, there are 300, but we know that there were more than.
They ought to dismiss those charges against her. It's ridiculous.
There were more than 300 people. I mean, right now we have people that were out on those Capitol grounds that we know were involved in beating police officers. They were a party to it, and some of those folks have not been charged. But going back to our first topic, which was the shooting, I have to reiterate. One of the things we've mentioned, which is mental health, was a cause of it. but we're not admitting the hatred in our nation that drove these two shootings. And until we confess the hatred in our nation that is on 10, it's as high as it can get, and that's driving this. Whether it's the hate for the Asian community, or whether it's retaliation for the perceived hate against the Muslim community, we're not talking about the hatred in our nation, the mental health that's attached to that hatred, and we're not talking about. And here's the one that we miss, Greg. And we're not talking about the white terrorism in our nation that's driving a good portion of this.
Oh, I think that's been talked about ad nauseum.
We didn't talk about that today, did we?
I don't think we've been talking about it nauseum.
We didn't talk about it.
I don't think it's been talked about enough. Hey, here's a question, right? It was discovered. So this is what we missed, Rick. It was discovered that there was a conspiracy, a deliberate cooperative effort between the Proud Boys and the other two guys, right? Where they saw online these guys exchanging emails and inboxes and social media box, right? They found this actually happened. How on earth is it that our intelligence community can tell what the hell is going on right now in Nova Scotia, right now in Israel, right now in Iraq, right now in Syria? We know what's happening pinpoint on the ground, but then we have in our own backyard, we have these conspiracies brewing where these guys are online and they are chattering and they're coming up with their conspiracy.
Well, here's an interesting rebuttal to that, Marcus. They did know about it. The FBI did know about it. And actually the discussion platform of Parler, who's been totally put out of business, basically, actually informed the FBI about what was going on this. It came out this week. So there is knowledge of that, and the FBI doesn't do anything about it, just like they didn't do anything about this shooter in Colorado.
Yeah,
but that was the FBI director under Trump.
My question was, how did we not know? And if we did know, how did we not act on it? How is it that we did not act on the intel that we had?
Well, that's
because they were told to stand down.
They were told to
because
stand down.
They were told to stand down. They were told to stand down. They was told to act like you don't see it. Act like
they
you don't
weren't
see it.
told that.
Threats.
Yeah.
It goes back to
They
the
were
statement
not told that.
that the congressman said. He said it goes back to the statement, and this is how it happens, right? When you have a representative in the United States government that says, I was not threatened by the people who actually invaded the Capitol,
That's right.
but I would have been threatened had they been black people. And the reason we saw that intel and didn't do anything about it was because they were the good old white people that we don't see as threats in the United States of America.
That's right. That's right.
Marcus, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir.
On this hatred issue. Do you think there's actually more hate in America today, or is the media highlighting more of the hate that's always been there? Because when I look around, like I'll give you an example. You know, there was this mosque that was burned here a couple of years ago. And I mean, you know, Interfaith Ministry and a bunch of other people went out there. There was a huge group of people that went together, stood with those people. People contributed from every single faith to rebuild the mosque. I mean, I just, you know, it seems like there's always that part of society that, you know, is broken spiritually. But I just don't know that I believe it's any bigger than it's ever been. I just think that we have a media that continually ramps that up and reports it because it's sort of shocking and interesting, while all the good stuff that goes on. I mean, you think about the thousands of people that volunteered to get out the vaccines in the last several months here. I mean, I could go on forever about the stuff, the great thing people do, but that never makes the news. In my day-to-day life, I don't run into people that hate other people. I mean, for any reason. I mean, and we saw it in Harvey when people, you know, were in trouble. People from every race, every religion were out there helping each other. I don't know that I buy the argument that there's a lot more hate. I just think that we, you know, with this 24-hour news cycle, it's that those voices are amplified a lot more than they were previously.
Well, Bill,
you know what I think? I
good
think they
news,
were
Bill.
there. I think they've been given permission to come out of the closet, and they came. The doors flew open, and they came flying out.
Well, that's a pretty hateful thing to say. So, Bill, back to your question about good
No,
news.
but it's
That's
not.
not true.
My community had to hide forever.
Hello.
You
Bill,
know?
to your point on good
Well,
news.
I was talking and you did jump in, but go ahead. I'll give you the floor.
So to your point,
I thought you were asking me a question.
well, okay.
Though.
A lot of hatred going on here.
Ask Marcus the question.
What did you say, Bob? There's a lot of hatred going on right here.
Yeah, there's a lot of hatred going around in here. So to your point about good news, Breitbart, I think, recognized that good news needs to be pushed out there. And so we created a channel called the Be Inspired channel. I'd invite people to come read it because we post good news every single day on there.
Well, Marcus, what's your answer to the question?
Here's the invitation, Bob. I'm hopeful that it will be good news and inspirational news about the entire all Americans and not just the ones that are part of the demographic of Breitbart. I'm not making any assumptions. I'm just extending.
Sounds like you did make an assumption, Marcus. So why don't you go read it before you go shooting your mouth off about it?
Hey, I promise I will. But my mouth goes. It goes. I can. Shooting his mouth. I mean, it just goes. But yeah. Bill, to answer your question, let me qualify this. Acceptable hate, right? And I didn't say that I'm not saying that there's more hatred today than before. Hell, I mean, you got to think about where I come from. I come from a line of people who've been hated on since they hit the shores of this nation, right? I don't believe that it's a greater amount of hate. I believe it's an acceptable amount of hate. It's condoned behavior. Here's the difference. When Bloody Sunday was put on television, people were like, "Oh no, we can't do that," right? There was this idea that was a mirror seeing who we are as a nation. And then all of a sudden deciding that we're going to be somebody different. When you saw cops and governors beating people on the steps that were just trying to vote, then America said, okay, we can't be these people. Today, America is saying, okay, we can be these people. We can display this hatred openly, and it's acceptable. So I think that's where it is. But you're absolutely right. It is heightened by the media, and they're
it is heightened by the media. But I want to be clear and fair about this. Video cameras. If it was not for video cameras, none of this would be discussed. The first time we saw somebody beat down was in LA when they beat Rodney King. That was the first time we saw that, and people was like, "Oh my God!" Black community and black men, especially, have been telling people this was going on for years. No one would listen. But then when this came out, that's when people like, okay, the Hardy raid. Do you know how many people Officer Goins has killed on as an officer on HPD? Over 6, but all of the other ones were African American. So they've been saying they lie on forums, they do this. Nobody would believe it because they were like, oh well, no, the officers wouldn't do this. Let me be clear about this. I want to go back to the Texans issue. Somebody said, well, if they do this to Deshaun, they're shooting themselves in the foot because his value diminishes. You don't think the Texans would hurt themselves to hurt Deshaun? Hell, what about DeAndre Hopkins? You gonna say that didn't hurt? Hell, that hurt. But they were like, you get your ass out of here. Okay, but that hurt. That hurt them to do that. So I'm saying that racism has not, I don't believe, risen, but it has become accepted. I should say that it's more accepted. I mean, at the poll, as I told you, a lady came up to me and grabbed at my mask, told me, take off my mask. I'm talking me. This is not China. We are not, you don't have to wear a mask. I'm not going to tell you. I told her, you'll get your ass off me. You ain't going to know where you are because you don't come up to me like that. But I don't believe anybody would have been that emboldened in previous administrations to just do that. Walk to a stranger at a voting bowl and just try to grab at your mask until you take it off. So I'm just saying, I believe it's more
Marcus, Texans fans can protest with their wallets, and not opening them to buy Texans tickets if they feel as if they have committed malpractice in running this franchise. I mean, it costs $300 or $400 for a family to go to a Texans game. Is it worth that investment? That's how Texans fans can protest.
Look, the Texans were a terrible organization before this crisis, and they are a terrible organization now. And if they continue under the same leadership, they'll continue to be a terrible organization. They're an organization that for the life of me, can't understand why they celebrate mediocrity, and they have done so for 2 decades. And I would not waste my time, me personally, my money, my dime, my dollar on. If you see me going to the Texans game, it's because I'm going to see whoever else they're playing. Somebody else came to town that I wanted to go see. but it's highly unlikely that you'll see that.
April Meek, our executive producer. Sue, go ahead real quick.
I just want to go back to what Bill had brought up, and I don't think there's any more. I think there's just been a greater freedom and permission given to finally express who you really are, show your true colors, and I think it just feels like there are more, but I think that it's always been there. They're just freer to come out and express how they feel.
Okay.
I think it's highly acceptable hatred that is attached to partisan politics.
Well, we'll talk about that on future episodes. I think I'm going to wrap this extended conversation up on Facebook.
Hey, go Cougs! Beat
Go
Oregon.
Cougs! Go Cougs!
Great conversation, everyone.
All right, make 5 Slam and Jam a pour out. Come on, y'all.
Yeah.